Hi, and welcome to Black Fire Podcast, where each episode ignites a passion for global gospel transformation, while some shed light on the rich missions history of the African diaspora. On this episode, we've got an amazing guest, Janell Nolan from Cape Town, South Africa. To be notified of new podcasts, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Black Fire Podcast, where not only do you get to hear the stories of the 1,000 catalysts, but you also get to be immersed in the beautiful missions history of the African diaspora and also hear from the hearts of those that are allied to see the next generation rise up and take their place in the kingdom of God, fulfilling the assignments that God has given to them and really truly creating what is a global gospel transformation with not with only in their communities but also globally. And so today I am so excited because I get to introduce you to a young lady who I feel like I've known for a ton longer than I have, but I've known now for about over a year, a little over a year, and she's incredible. And not only that, but Janell is number one of the 1,000 catalysts of Black Fire Ministries. And she is here to share her life, to share her story with you, and to really inspire you as you hear her heart of how God has really called her to be that catalytic movement of bringing his love, his truth, and his peace, not only to her community there in Cape Town, South Africa, but also she's going to be doing some traveling with me, and God has more plans for her. And so, Janell, welcome to Black Fire Podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's been a long time coming, so I'm super, super excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here too. Like I said, I feel like even though it's been just a little over a year, I feel like it's been years because
Oh,
the way
yeah.
the way that God bonded our hearts together has just been so cool. And it's just been amazing in even this short period of time, all the life that we've been able to do together, the
Yeah.
experiences we've had doing ministry out on the streets, doing ministry in the church, I mean, it's just so cool. And it just goes to show that God is not limited by
Mm-hmm.
countries or oceans or anything. And so I, again, am just so excited for everybody to hear your story today. Again, listeners, this is Janell Nolan. She is the number one of the 1,000 Black Fire Ministries catalyst, and she's here to bring you just her life. And so we're going to dive in. So, Janell, I
Do
think
this.
one of the most coolest things that we could start out talking about today is just for you to share your faith journey with our listeners, and then we'll move ahead, but let's not go too quickly, but then kind of how it's led to where we're at today, what you're doing
Yeah.
today. But let's just start from like square one. Like, who is Janell Nolan? Like, tell us your story.
So I think it's only right to go back to kind of even before I was even an idea in my parents' head. And it ties into where I'm currently at in life, and that's what I firmly believe. And I go back to my grandparents on both sides.
Mm,
And my grandfather on my dad's side was a missionary. Before that, I think he was a policeman. And at
mhm,
some point in his life, he transitioned over to being a full-time missionary and mainly in Africa. And my dad grew up with that, with both my grandparents in that ministry, my grandmother being the support from my grandfather, but at the same time, a whole powerhouse all on her own. And also on my mom's side, where he was also at one point in his life, he's working, and then at some point he transitioned to being a full-time pastor in a church. He did some missionary work also locally in like the area where they lived, but both of them were in ministry. And then come my parents, and they were also full-time ministry at one point, powerful worship leaders, incredible voices. And then comes me being a complete surprise, starting with they weren't able to have kids.
mm,
They were not able to have kids, and they wanted kids. Come along, me and my brother. Um, my mom is at the hospital with my brother because as an infant, he had quite a few health issues. And then after one big scare, they're sitting and my mom's like, so listen, I have something to tell you. I wasn't feeling well. I got to check up at the doctor and I'm pregnant again. And here I am. And I always like, I was surprised when I came here and I've just continued to be a surprise for them. And then growing up with that influence, always going with my parents to church, going to every event, going with to band practice, going, because there wasn't babysitters. It was just, you go with your parents and you're there.
Right.
So you're constantly in that environment and growing up with that. And around 2015, 2016, I got baptized. And around that same period, the church we were in at the time had missionaries come and tell about their work, what they're doing. I don't even remember where they were stationed. I just remember they're coming and just watching these videos and these feedback and just being so impacted and turning to my parents and being like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then obviously you go through your teenage phase and life happens and you kind of forget about that. And come to 2017, I'm 18 years old. I want to go travel the world. I want to get out of my country. I just, you just grow up hearing all the negative things. I want to, the grass is always greener on the other side kind of thing. And you go, and I never knew what I wanted to do with my life. I just was like, I don't know what I want to do for a career. But always the question in the back of my mind was, God, I want to do something that glorifies you. But what can that be? What is that? I can't see myself working a 9-to-5 job. What do I do? And I never came up with an answer. And in 2017, I was a month, 18 years old. And I go off to Europe and I go au pair in the Netherlands for a year. And I always love taking photos and I carry around this little click and shoot with me everywhere, capturing every moment. And the one day, just this light bulb goes on. I was like, this is what I want to do. This is, and I come back, I go study photography, and I come to a point where I am an intern at my local church at the moment. And how that came to be is I wasn't even supposed to be at this one meeting. And it is also a minister we're connected to from overseas, and it's actually mainly the leadership, and they're getting together. And then somewhere in my mind, it's a braai, a bunch of people of the church are going to get together. Somewhere me and my mom got my crosswires mixed, but looking back, it was all God. It was all his purpose and his plan, because I get there and we're sitting and we're listening about what this guy is doing and the missions that they're going out on, and they're evangelizing them, doing all of these things. And I'm like, and just something clicks in my heart. And I'm like, I don't know how. I'm like, I want to do this. I've studied, I've done all these things. And I'm sitting in here, I'm like, where does my photography come into the big idea of the question always, how do I glorify God with what I do? Yeah. And I go to my pastor, and if you guys listen to the previous podcast, you would have met him by now, Pastor Sean Basson. And I go to him up after this meeting, and I'm like, Pastor Sean, I don't know how, but I want to work for the church somehow. Maybe I could just come in as a volunteer during the week, do some stuff. I study photography. We've done some stuff. How do we go about this? And he's like, oh, well, come to think of it, we've been talking about starting an internship program. So that would be awesome. You would be the first, you would be like the trial runner of this. So, that's so cool. Well, let's talk going forward. And I spent, I think it was a year and a half, 2 years doing this internship, and God doing amazing things, just taking my photography in a God-centered environment and just sharpening that tool, taking the practicalities I learned and teaching me, how do I see God through this? How do I have people see through this? And just sort of nurturing the talent that I had into a passion and an anointing and a gift, and just having that space. And eventually, I think after a year and a half, 2 years, I worked full-time for my church for a year. And in that time, I was helping with the social media. I was taking photos, I was editing photos, I was posting them, I was doing all the things, got involved with our youth as a volunteer, and eventually coming to the place. And to this day, I still have no idea how it happened, becoming the head of the youth department and kind of running it and making sure there's events and we're getting the kids involved. And so much happened during that period. And all of it was preparing me for where I'm going. And you're never finished prepared. You're never like, okay, ding, oven's done, you're ready, you're done. You know, I think each season of life you go into, you're learning and you're growing on top of what your foundation is. And each one is like it's a new layer on top of that. So we go through this, and then you start, I think it was in 2022, Pastor Sean somehow came across, you've talked about them before, Steiger, which is how we got connected.
Exactly.
Steiger International, and I was like, and he shows videos to the young adults group, and you know, and he's like, and I'm watching this, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And we get to a point and we do one of their worldwide training calls, and I'm just sitting in this living room where we're at, and I'm like, whoa. I didn't even know this was a thing. I just, you know, and you're sitting here and you're like this very creative, bubbly, weird kind of thing that I am. And I say that with so much love towards myself. I love the way that I am. I love that I'm unique and that there's only one of me. I love it. But sitting in your own sort of town, you're like, where do you go with this? What do you do with this? You know? And you're seeing all of these crazy out there people, tattoos everywhere, piercings, crazy performances, and just above all, proclamations and people reaching the world out there, people who are lost and broken and hurting. And I remember sitting there and I'm just like, I'm amazed. And it's as if something just clicked. So I would like puzzle pieces like, oh, this is what I need to be doing. How do I do this? And at the end of the call, you hear about Steiger International Missionary School. And I'm like, and that's obviously the next leg of our journey. But before that, Sean gets into contact with some of the leaders of the organization. And they're like, you guys need to come train us. We need to do training with you. We need to do all these things. And he's like, once he's got something in his mind, he's like, go, 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 go. And he gets a team to come and train us and equip us and work with us. And Cyrena was one of the head runners for that to come. And that was the first time we got introduced and we sort of connected, little knowing that few interactions we had during that week would lead to where we are now still blows my mind. And again, touching on what you said at the beginning, I cannot believe that was only in April 2023.
Yes.
It's only been a year and it doesn't feel like that. It's crazy. And we do this and I'm there and I'm on photography and I'm fighting this internal battle because I'm like, I want to be here. I want to do what you guys are doing, but I want to capture it. I want to, you know. And crazy thing. And I'm like, yep, this just makes sense. This is it. This is it. And then they were like, next step. And we got into the process and I applied for Steiger Missionary School.
Yes.
7 weeks in Germany. And for some of you that don't know, the currency exchange between rands, which is the South African currency, and euros, it's a lot. So I'm looking at this, I'm like, I want to go. And then you find out the school fees and the travel costs and Airbnbs and food and every other thing you would need. And you're like, okay, that's crazy. But God comes through.
Yes.
And we get to Germany, which has all of its trials, all of its own, and we'll get to that later. And it's just, again, it just makes sense. And I'm like, this is what God created me for. this is why a part of why I am, little quirks and things that don't fit into everyday life.
Yes.
And you're like, there's a purpose behind all of that. Every single little thing, there's a purpose behind it. And then that was the second time we met you in person, because you were only able to come for like the last 3 days. And when we saw you, myself and Daniel, who you guys will be meeting later, another one of the 1,000, he was there with me. We were the only two South Africans and like, I think 150 people from all over the globe. And you're just like, what is this? This is crazy. And you come there, and we'd only have brief interactions while you were in Cape Town in April 2023. Now come to September 2023, and we see you and we're like, family, Cyrena.
Yes.
And I'm just like, I still remember we're sitting in the field and everybody's grabbing pizza. We're about to grab pizza and pray. And then I see you walking between the buildings, and I'm like, I jump up so quickly. I was mid-conversation with my friend that I had made while I was there. And I'm up and I'm running, and she's like, what is going on? And I'm just like, Cyrena. And we like, hi. And it just felt like coming home.
Yeah.
It really just felt like one of your closest family members that you have not seen in the longest time. And it was so beautiful. And I think without even knowing it, I knew in that moment, this was more than just, we're walking in relationship, we're walking in mentorship, because through the entire period, and I don't think anyone really knows this other than these that were a part of it, between when Cyrena came in April 2023, and we went to Steiger International Mission School, there were almost bi-weekly calls where we're sitting and she's encouraging us and she's pouring into us and she's getting to know us and we're getting to know her and we're building relationship. Yeah. So at that point, it didn't matter. There was only the second time I had saw you in person. It was like, this is family. This is part of my group. And for those that know me, I've got a very small circle. And it was just like, I'm in my comfort zone now again. I'm like, so it was just incredible, a part of that. So that's kind of like my journey of getting up until here. Yeah. And now we're here and I'm part of the 1,000, which is incredible. It's not what I thought I would be doing, but it's where I'm meant to be. It is where I'm meant to be through and through. And it's as if you're just every day you're waking up and you got things to do for the ministry and you're like, and you're walking in purpose and in passion and you're excited and you're like, you're on fire. You're on fire for God, even more. And all those times where it was quiet and you're questioning and you're like, God, what now? Where now? And he's silent and you just have to wait. And you just have to run to him and you have to keep faith and you have to keep looking to him, is so, so incredible. So
yeah, I think it's so great just to hear kind of like from the very beginnings, because it was very evident as you were sharing your story that God was orchestrating your journey and your path in crazy ways that you would have never thought that things would lead up to where they are today.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so great because as you're sharing too, then I remember like the milestones also of just how he established first in 2016, my first trip to South Africa.
Yes.
But how it was sown into my life from when I was 11 years old. And it was like, God knew what he was doing. He knew that he meant for your and my path to cross. He knew that he meant for us to be at this place where we're doing this kingdom work today. And I even remember like when I first met you and when I first met Daniel, and you two are now like rolling deep with me and we're going strong, and I remember when I met you guys, there was just something in my heart and my spirit that just made sense. It just made sense. And so even throughout the whole journey of from when we first met, and you're right, it was like we first met in April and then, it's gone. And then there was months in between where we didn't see each other, but we were still doing life together. And those calls that we were having were just crazy awesome and wonderful. And little did we know that God was intricately weaving everything together, And
Oh yeah.
I felt the same. Like When I knew that I was coming over to Germany, people were like, "Oh yeah, what are you going for?" And I was like, "I'm going for my kids." They're like, "Oh
Yes.
wait, what?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going for my kids." I was like, "Janelle and Daniel are there, and I need to be with them."
Yeah. Yeah.
And everybody's like, "Oh, that's so cool." And so yeah, when I walked around the corner and when I saw you guys, I literally cried. I cried because it was just so good to see you, and I just felt like, okay, God, you're doing something crazy here,
Mm.
and I just want to say yes to it. And for me too, like from the time I was in South Africa with you guys last year in April to the time that we were together in Germany in September to the time that I was back with you guys in South Africa last year in December,
Yes.
it was
Yeah.
just God just saying, "Here you go, here you go, here you go, here you go, here you go." And I mean, it's just been an amazing journey. And so now that we're looking at where you're at now, Janelle, and where you feel like God is taking you, I would love for you to share with our listeners because you talked about like going through some trials, going through some challenges. What would you say would be like one of maybe many or one that sticks out to you of a significant challenge that you faced and how you've overcome it? Because I know that hearing those stories, they inspire me when I hear them, and I know our listeners will be inspired too. So go, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I want to be purposeful with what I do. And I'm like, okay, God, what do you want to share? What am I sharing here? Because you could go tiny moments that have big impacts or big things that affect you for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
And he takes me back to, I think I can't remember exactly when. I think it was around 2016.
Mhm.
Um, I had I had been baptized around in my early teens, and you're excited, and a couple of days after that, a couple of weeks after that, you're on fire and you're going, you're da, da, da. But through that whole process, I was so confused and being like, how do I study the Bible? How do I you hear about having a relationship with God, and I know that's what it should be, but how do you do this? And I think looking back, it was almost shame to be like, I should know the answers to this. I grew up in a church, as we touched on earlier in the podcast. I went with my parents to everything. I saw incredible things. I was in a church where people were literally getting raised from the dead,
Mhm.
cancer being healed in an instant, and incredible things. So I should know the answer to this, but I didn't. And almost feeling very stupid, I didn't ask the question. And back when I was a teenager, I wasn't as close to my parents as I am now in my life. I don't
Mhm.
think any teenager is really super close. And I was very introverted and very withdrawn. I didn't know how to interact with people. I was homeschooled, and I just did not like people because I didn't understand them. I didn't know how to relate to them. I
Mhm.
just didn't know. I didn't know at all. And this confusion almost opened a door for the enemy,
Mhm.
and he came in with depression. And I would go through these periods of like, it started with this sort of just being like, okay, well, clearly, if I don't know this and I don't know that, and you pray these prayers that aren't really Jesus focused. So obviously they have no power because you're not praying from the right place. You're not. So all of this confusion, and you're like, I don't know what to do. And you would go into this period of just pain and
Mhm.
anger. And I had an extreme problem all my life with feeling like I am a burden. I don't I don't help anyone. I don't anything. I just cause problems. I'm useless. I'm all of these things. It was a firm belief within myself. And
Mhm.
again, because I felt ashamed of that because I'm a Christian. I grew up this way. I don't have the typical problems of I have an amazing parents who love me.
Mhm.
I have school, I have a roof over my head, I have food every day. I didn't lack what the world sees as lack.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so like I don't talk about it because I'm like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I have no right to feel this way. I have, and so the enemy continues that lies and that narrative. And I eventually got to a point truly believing I have no purpose. I am just a burden. I just add on to problems. My problems really aren't that big. They're just, all these people have all these bigger other issues.
Yeah.
And getting really to a very dangerous point of being like, it would really just be better for everyone if I was not here. If I was dead, no one would miss me. And obviously that was not me. That was the enemy running a narrative. But because I had not built a relationship with God, I had not learned to study his word and get to know who he is as my father and creator and my king and ruler. There was that part missing. And I got to a point in one worship service where I was just so done. I was so heavy. I was just so over it. And I was sitting in the back of our church in a dark corner. And I still have the notebook somewhere, my journal, where I was literally writing this to God and being like, God, I know you're real. There's no doubt with me in you that you are real. I've seen things. My family has gone through things. I know that you are real. But I don't know what to do anymore. Yeah. I don't know where to go anymore. I have no hope. I have nothing. Everyone would just be better off if I was not there because they're dealing with enough and they don't need to deal with this. So if you don't do something, I am done. That's literally what I told him. I'm like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Because what is the purpose of all of this? What is, you see all these people and they're filled with joy and you're all these things and you're like, why am I like this? I have a loving family. I have an amazing home. I have a bed. I have food. I have everything that I need. Parents who are beyond supportive. I have no right to feel this way. So if you don't help me, I really am done. And I'm gonna come to you in heaven because then there's no point for me being here. And I remember in an instant that weight and that darkness just lifted as if someone had put a weighted blanket on me and I carried that and instantly just lifted. And I started crying and I wrote the first spoken word that I had ever written. I wrote in that moment. And I went up during worship. All of this happened within the span of half an hour, which is crazy if I think about it. And I went up onto stage. It was literally like our pastor was, you get those moments in church where afterwards God's, the pastor is ministering because God's still moving. So you're in that moment. And I'm like, I need to go up there. And I was terrified. Terrified. People, you see me talking like this and being out there and comfortable with this. This was never me. I hated being the center of attention. I hated people looking. I hated people talking to me. Because again, I was terrified of people. Because I was terrified of what they would think of me. I remember as a kid, as a teenager, first time I ever met someone, my immediate thought was, this person hates me. Yeah. My immediate thought was, this person hates me. They do not like me. And this obviously added to what was going on in our current narrative. And I go up on stage and my pastor, Pastor Sean, sees me and he looks at me and I'm like, can I share something? He's like, yeah. And I'd never done something like this. So the fact that I had the opportunity to come up and just speak and do this in front of everyone, and in that moment, confess to people that God had healed me from depression and he'd taken it away before. Yeah. And I felt, on the one side, I felt so bad because my parents were on worship that morning and this was the first they were hearing of any of this. They were finding out with the rest of the congregation in that moment.
Yep.
And it was just so incredible. And I could go up there and I could have this amazing testimony of like, I was about to kill myself, but God saved me, and He came in and He answered my prayer.
Yeah.
And God just came and through that, I started the journey of really asking questions, being like, how do I get to know Him? You know, and after that, I was like, I have to do something. God brought me out of this. I can't go back there. I refuse to go back there. I now know joy and lightness and love again. I cannot go back to that dark, terrible thing. So I would start asking questions and being like, okay, Dad, where do I find resources? How do I do this? What do I do? Somebody help me. You know, my dad came, he gave me his resources, he gave me easy study stuff. And from that, I could learn to be like, okay, God, how do we do this? So, yeah.
To all our listeners and members of the Black Fire podcast community, thank you for embarking on this journey with us. Your support and engagement are invaluable as we continue to grow. Stay connected by visiting www.blackfireministries.org to keep up with our events and ministry updates. If today's episode has inspired you, please consider sharing it and supporting our work by making a donation at www.blackfireministries.org/donate. Every contribution plays a crucial role. Until next time, let's keep the fire burning bright as we ignite change and transform lives.